All right, we're training chest and back at Iron Prodigy Gym in Fort Collins, Colorado. My buddy Chris Havakos owns this gym. I've known Chris for years. It's one of those throwback, old school gyms that has a ton of pieces of equipment that are difficult to find. He's kind of on a mission, or has been on a mission, to try to locate unique pieces that, quite frankly, the members typically don't care about. But he does, because he's an old school, or was an old school meathead, just like a lot of the rest of us. Starting off today after just a couple warm-up sets of cable flies real light with a Dynabody vertical bench press. Admittedly, I've only used this piece of equipment this one time. I haven't even seen this piece in any other gym over the course of the last 30 years. It's a little bit of a different approach when you're standing up on your feet, standing tall, bench pressing. My buddy Pedram is up from New Mexico, client of mine, friend of mine, good guy, ex-football player. You're going to see very quickly that his weights are going to make mine look relatively insignificant. Here we're taking off a plate. I'll be taking off a couple more here in a minute as he moves up in his weights, and I probably stay where I'm at. I typically train to failure or close to it. It's rare that I do forced reps. Here we're going to do just a couple. I got to try to keep up with Pedram, maybe not in weights, but at least in intensity. When you train with someone stronger than you, it's quite motivating in the sense that it helps to keep you pushing as much weight as you can possibly push. Even though I prefer to train by myself, there are drawbacks to that. Obviously, it's difficult to get a spot, which can put you in a tough situation training by yourself. But it's also difficult to draw motivation. And even after training for 30 years, I feel like I'm pretty motivated. I feel like I can train relatively hard. But when somebody steps in to train with you that is much stronger than you are, it does still tend to make you dig a little bit deeper and put a few more pounds on the bar or on the weight stack than you otherwise would. We're moving to cable crossovers here. I'm very deliberate with all of my movements. Doesn't matter if it's a compound movement where I'm trying to move a little bit more weight, or if it's an isolation movement. With cable flies, you'll see from this angle, I tend to keep the angle of pull down towards the floor as opposed to out in front of me. I find it easier to stabilize my body this way, or my upper body, versus trying to do this movement out in front of me. I'm a full stretch, full squeeze guy when it comes to isolation movements. You typically will not see me shorten a movement unless it's a compound movement like a press, where I try to eliminate, possibly or on occasion, the lockout portion. Throughout the years, I've backed off on my emphasis on poundages or the weights that I use. I still try to train as heavy as I can, but I tend to use the weight as opposed to just lifting the weight. When it comes to isolation movements like a cable fly, I'm even that much more deliberate. So you will have noticed on that stack there wasn't a whole lot of weight on there. Within the last couple years since my switch to TRT, I've reevaluated my training, not only for efficiency, but as far as also evaluating whether an exercise is worth the cost to benefit. Getting warmed up here on incline chest, and I've started to go with more dumbbell work as far as isolation or fly movements the last couple years as well. My thought process was basically, what have I not done? What have I eliminated and thought was not effective years ago that I need to revisit? And I didn't do this just for chest. I did this straight across the board. What happens when you train for a long time is you tend to come up with things that you like and feel work and work well, and tend to dismiss things that you feel either don't work well, don't feel right, or don't seem to hit the muscle the way you want it to. The problem with training for years and years, and in my case, over 3 decades, is you eliminate things that you don't feel are very effective, and then don't come back and revisit those things again. And I think that that's a huge mistake, a mistake that I made. So in the last couple years, I've come back to exercises that I've eliminated maybe a handful of years ago, sometimes 20 years ago. And I'll point out some of those exercises as we go through the training footage here for the off season. Again, not pushing big weights. There are going to be some of you who are looking going, oh my goodness, he's not getting a lot of reps. Those are only 95s or 100s. You're right. Again, I'm digging in more. I'm less concerned about the amount of weight I can move and more concerned about the stress that I'm putting on the muscle. This helps to keep the risk of injury low. All these dumbbells are loose and they're not rubber plated. I love old school dumbbells and plates that make noise. Notice I'm eliminating the lockout. Sometimes I lock out on these movements like a dumbbell press. Other times I go about 3/4 or 2/3 of the way up, trying to eliminate that lockout. Keep more of the stress on my chest, a little bit less on triceps and shoulders. Here's a little bit of a throwback pec deck here. If any of you have not used this machine before, the angle of pull is not directly to the side. I got to explain this the best I can. But as I extend and stretch here, you'll see that my arms actually come down a little bit. There's a little bit of a movement where it starts in the stretched position a little bit lower than it is in the contracted position. It's difficult to explain how this feels, but I will just tell you that it's awesome. If you see this machine, make sure that you use it, if even just to see how it feels, so that you understand the range of motion is just a little bit different than most of the modern pec decks. We're doing something here for filming that I don't do frequently, and that is supersets. Anytime I superset, or the large majority of the time I superset, it'll be in isolation to a compound movement. Might seem basic, might seem simple, might seem obvious. But I make it a point to start with an isolation move to kind of pre-exhaust, and then I move into a compound movement here on chest so that I can bring in my shoulders and triceps in a pressing movement to be able to fatigue the chest even more. A lot of these old school gyms don't have air conditioning. A lot of people complain about that. They can't stand it. They don't like being hot. They don't like sweating. I'm an old guy. I'm old school. I love to sweat. I'd prefer that it were just rolling off of me and pouring off of me, and what I'm wearing is soaked. Probably just a little bit of a psychological component, but I like it nonetheless. Finishing up chest, we're going to move into back here. I have trained chest and back together for a very long time. Some people like it, some people don't. One of the arguments is after chest, it's difficult to give 100% to your back workout, and I disagree with that. Though I may come in fresh if I train back by itself and be a little bit stronger starting out, it also takes me longer to warm up. When I'm finished training chest, 1 or 2 sets of my first back movement is really all I need to be warm and ready to go. This is due primarily to the fact that a lot of the back muscles obviously stabilize during chest movements. You'll notice here these mag grips are just to die for. They're pretty popular these days. When they first came out, they were a sponsor of ours on Intense Muscle. And the owner sent me several handles for me to take to Armbrust Pro Gym, and they were a huge hit. If you haven't used these bars, and most of you probably have, but if you haven't, they're pretty much a genius in the sense that they created a handle that pretty much locks your grip in the way that they set up the handles. So if your grip fatigues during regular lat pulls or regular rows with a regular bar, you don't get that from a mag grip bar. There's no way to lock in straps to reinforce your grip anyway, but they're not needed. You'll see I have my straps on. I always keep them on my wrist dangling just so that they're there when or if I need them. I try hard to restrict or limit the amount of work I do with my straps. I feel that training with the straps takes away from forearm strength, forearm development, a little bit of bicep development, that sort of thing. If you're struggling with forearm development, I would highly recommend that you start to eliminate back exercises or sets during your back workout where you're using your straps. Rely more on your grip, build the grip strength, and I think that your back development will progress quite well if you do that. Here we're on the hammer strength, isolateral, under grip row. There are some hammer strength pieces of equipment that I absolutely love, others that I feel that the angle is just absolutely terrible, and it makes me wonder who was working at hammer strength when they came up with some of the angles. This back angle here, though, is very good. I prefer the underhand grip because I feel it's a more natural grip. Doesn't force my elbows or wrists into an unnatural or uncomfortable position. And with these isolateral machines, I've gotten into a habit the last couple years, as I was talking about previously, where I have reevaluated my training and kind of gone back to questioning some things I eliminated early on in my training, I hate to call it career, but for lack of a better word, we'll call it my training career, and have come back to reevaluating a lot of these things and pulling on isolateral machines one at a time, left versus right. And one thing that I do not prefer to do is to pull all my reps for a set on one side first and then go to the other side. I will rarely pull a set of reps all from the left and then switch to the right or vice versa. If I'm going to alternate and do something isolateral, it's going to be left, right, and repeat. As I fatigue more throughout my back exercises, I tend to move more to machines, especially when it comes to rowing. I don't like to have to balance things out much as I fatigue. So with a fixed machine, you don't have to worry as much about balance, and you're just pulling the hell out of the handles. Today we're supersetting the machine row with standing dumbbell rows. kind of a favorite superset of mine. I have such chronic lower back issues that it works better for me when I do rowing movements where my lower back has to support my upper body later in my back workout, so that I can hit my back hard but not use ridiculously heavy weight. Kind of a pre-exhaust, if you will. The dumbbell pullover is another exercise that I've come back around to over the years. I've always been narrow-shouldered. My scapula do not like to pull apart and round out. I always give my wife a hard time because if she does chins, she has that genetic capability where when she's hanging from a chin bar, her scapula are pulled out. Mine don't pull out at all. I've actually gotten better upper back width out of dumbbell pullovers than I have out of chins. Chins for me only really develop my lats. To widen my back, pullovers have helped tremendously. And again, I don't have a wide back. I have been dealing with genetic inferiority in that area for 34 years. So I've got to dig a little deeper, experiment a little bit more, and try to come up with those things that can help, even if a little bit. Finishing up here with rear delts, which is something that I have done for the last couple years as well. After training back, especially after rows, the rear delts are hammered anyway. It doesn't take many sets to finish off my rear delts at this point. When I train rear delts in the past on separate days, maybe I'll train back one day and then train rear delts the next, they become overtrained very quickly. It's dark, it's rainy, we're done. Let's get the hell out.